I'm not using my real name. I can't. The others who survived made me promise I'd never identify them, never reveal the exact location, never give authorities enough information to trace this back to the company or the site. But I have to tell someone what happened. I have to warn people about what's hunting in those northern forests. Because what ambushed our logging crew wasn't natural. It wasn't animal behavior. And what we found the next morning in the aftermath. God, I still can't sleep without seeing it. My crew was working a remote timber operation in northern Wisconsin, about 90 miles from the nearest town, deep in national forest territory that most people don't even know exists. We were a 6-man team, experienced loggers, not rookies, men who'd spent decades in the woods and thought they'd seen everything nature could offer. We were wrong. We hadn't seen anything. We hadn't understood what was possible. The attack happened on our 9th night. But what we discovered at dawn, what had been done during those hours of darkness, what had been left for us to find, that's what destroyed us. That's what made 3 grown men quit the industry entirely and spend the rest of their lives refusing to go near forests. That's what put one man in psychiatric care and another into early retirement in a desert state where trees don't grow tall enough to cast shadows. I'm recording this from a location I won't disclose, using equipment I paid for in cash. I've changed enough details that the company can't definitively prove this is about their operation, but anyone who was there will recognize the truth. And if they try to silence me, if I disappear or have an accident or suddenly recant everything, at least this video will remain. At least someone will know what's out there. Before I describe what happened, before I tell you about the ambush and what we found in the morning light, I need you to do something. Hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Not for me, not for views or algorithm or any of that, but because this information needs to spread. It needs to reach hunters and campers and hikers and anyone who spends time in remote forests. It needs to reach people before they end up like my crew, traumatized and broken and unable to explain what happened because no one would believe them anyway. Subscribe because this story needs to survive. Share it. Save it. Make sure it can't be erased or suppressed or dismissed as fantasy. Because what hunted us is still out there. Still hunting. Still leaving messages that no one sees until it's too late. Our operation was standard. Clear-cut a designated section of mature timber, process it on-site, prepare it for transport. We'd done identical jobs across Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. This should have been routine work. Easy money. Safe conditions. The permits were legitimate. The Forest Service had signed off, and the company had environmental clearances. Everything was legal and approved. But from the first day, the forest felt hostile. Wildlife patterns were wrong. We'd see fresh deer kills, not eaten, just killed and left. Carcasses ripped apart with a violence that seemed excessive, wasteful. Coyote remained scattered across our access roads, torn to pieces, arranged almost like warnings. And the sounds at night, howling that wasn't quite wolf, wasn't quite coyote, wasn't quite anything we could identify. Wild dogs, our crew chief said. Feral pack, maybe rabid. Stay close to camp at night. Keep weapons accessible. But I'd worked in wolf territory. I'd heard wolf packs communicate, heard their hunting calls, their territorial vocalizations. This was different. This was deeper, more resonant, more structured. And it came from multiple directions simultaneously, north, south, east, west, like we were surrounded by something coordinating its movements. Days 1 through 8, we focused on work and ignored the signs. The tree markings, claw gouges that started at 7 feet up and dragged downward. The tracks, canine but wrong, too large, with a heel impression that suggested bipedal locomotion. The smell that would drift through camp at night, musk and rot and something else, something predatory and ancient. Just bears, we told ourselves. Just wolves. Just our imagination working overtime in isolation. We were lying to ourselves. We knew it. But admitting the truth meant accepting something impossible. And none of us were ready for that. Night 8, the howling got closer. Much closer. Circling our camp in patterns that felt deliberate, tactical. We huddled around the fire, weapons ready, Axes, rifles, anything that could serve as defense. The howling would come from one direction, we'd turn to face it, and then it would come from behind us. Playing with us. Testing us. Learning our reactions. Around midnight, it stopped. Complete silence fell. No insects. No night birds. No wind. Just absolute quiet that pressed against our ears like physical weight. "They're gone," someone said, though none of us believed it. We didn't sleep that night. Stayed armed, stayed alert, stayed together. When dawn finally came and nothing had attacked, we convinced ourselves it was over. Whatever pack had been circling us had moved on, found better hunting grounds, lost interest. We were so stupidly wrong. Night 9 started normally. We'd had a productive day, cleared another acre of timber, stacked and prepared loads for the trucks coming next morning. Morale was better. Only 5 more days until rotation ended and we could go home. We made dinner, joked around the fire, even managed to relax slightly. The attack came at 3:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I checked my watch when the screaming started, some automatic response. Some need to mark the moment everything changed. They hit us from all sides simultaneously. Not random. Not opportunistic. Coordinated assault, multiple entry points, overwhelming force. Our camp defenses, lights, fire, weapons, meant nothing. They came through them like they weren't there. I saw them clearly in the firelight and spotlight beams. Bipedal. 7 feet tall, maybe taller. Covered in fur, dark, matted, reeking. But the heads, God, the heads were wrong. Elongated snouts. Pointed ears. Eyes that reflected light like canine eyes, but positioned forward like predator eyes. They looked like wolves that had been twisted into human shape, or humans that had been cursed into wolf form. Either way, they shouldn't exist. Couldn't exist. But they did. And they were hunting us with intelligence that made bears look like insects. They separated us instantly, drove us in different directions, split our group, isolated individuals. I saw Tomas get dragged away into darkness, still screaming, his rifle firing twice before going silent. I saw Marcus try to barricade himself in the equipment shed before something tore the door off its hinges and reached inside. I saw Paul running toward the vehicles, almost making it, before something massive and fast and unstoppable, intercepted him. 3 of us made it to the radio shed, me, Danny, and Miguel. We locked ourselves inside, a reinforced structure designed to protect communication equipment from weather and wildlife. Heavy door, small windows, solid construction. We armed ourselves with everything available, fire axes, crowbars, a single hunting rifle with 8 rounds. For 6 hours, they surrounded that shed, testing it, circling it, making sound that I can't adequately describe, growling that contained almost words, vocalizations that seemed to mock our voices, breathing that came from throats too large for any natural canine. They scratched at the walls, not frantically, not desperately, but methodically, measuring, evaluating, learning the structure. Several times, something hit the door hard enough to bend the frame inward. They could have gotten in if they'd really tried. They could have torn that shed apart. But they didn't. They were playing, testing, seeing how we'd react, enjoying our fear. Around 4:30 a.m., we heard Tomas screaming again. He was alive, still alive, somewhere out in the darkness, and they were making him scream, making sure we heard, making sure we understood what would happen if they caught us. The screaming lasted 20 minutes. Then silence. Danny started praying. Miguel just stared at the door, rifle clutched, so tight his knuckles were white. I tried the radio, dead, lines cut, antenna torn down. Our phones had no signal this deep in the forest. We were completely isolated, completely helpless, listening to our friends die while we hid. Dawn came slowly. Light filtered through the window slits, gray and cold. The sounds outside gradually stopped. The presence around the shed faded. By 7 a.m., we couldn't hear anything except wind and distant birds cautiously returning. We waited another hour, then 2. Finally, around 9 a.m., we opened the door. The camp was destroyed. Every structure damaged or demolished. equipment overturned, supplies scattered. But it wasn't random destruction. It was methodical, purposeful. Our cutting equipment, chainsaws, axes, logging tools, had been gathered into a pile and buried under dirt and branches. Our vehicles had been disabled, tires slashed, engines torn apart, fuel lines cut. Everything we needed to work or escape had been systematically neutralized. And then we found them, the others. Tomas, Marcus, and Paul. What had been done to them? I can't fully describe it. I won't fully describe it because some images should never be shared, should never be planted in other people's minds to grow and fester. But I need you to understand the basics. I need you to understand why 3 experienced loggers looked at that scene and immediately quit an industry they'd spent their entire adult lives in. They'd been arranged, positioned deliberately in a clearing near the tree line, not torn apart randomly, not scattered by feeding frenzy, arranged with clear intent and terrible intelligence. Each man was positioned kneeling, facing toward the forest, arms positioned like they were embracing the trees in front of them. Their cutting tools, their chainsaws and axes, had been forced into their hands, positioning them like they were still working, still cutting, frozen in the act that had brought them to this forest. But their bodies had been opened. I won't detail how, but opened in a way that displayed everything inside, like they were being turned inside out, like something wanted to show us what we really were beneath the surface. And the trees they faced, young trees, saplings maybe 10 years old, had been carved with their blood. Symbols, patterns, messages in a language we couldn't read, but could understand on some primal level. This is what happens to those who cut. This is what becomes of those who take. This is the price for entering our territory with tools of destruction. I'm going to pause here. I need you to comment below. I need you to tell me if you've heard of Dogman doing this, not just killing, but arranging bodies, creating displays, sending messages through positioning and symbolism. I need to know if this is documented behavior or if what we encountered was something worse, something unique, something that's been learning and evolving and developing new ways to communicate through violence. Comment now. Share this video. Tell me what you know. Because what we found that morning wasn't natural predation. It was judgment. It was punishment. It was something intelligent making absolutely certain we understood the consequences of our actions. And it was personal. Miguel approached the bodies first, braver than Danny or me, or maybe just more in shock. He got close enough to see details we couldn't from a distance. That's when he started screaming. Their eyes were open. All 3 men. Eyes wide, staring, but not dead. Not glazed. Moving. Tracking Miguel's approach. Blinking. Aware. They were still alive. Somehow, impossibly, after what had been done to them, they were still alive. Help me, Tomas whispered, voice barely audible. Please help me. We tried. God, we tried. We approached, tried to figure out how to move them, how to help them, how to do anything. But the moment we got close, the howling started again. From the tree line. From multiple directions. A clear warning. Don't touch them. Don't move them. Don't interfere with the display. We backed away, and the howling stopped. We approached again, and it resumed, closer, more aggressive. The message was clear. These men were being kept alive deliberately. This was part of the message, part of the punishment. And we weren't allowed to end it or ease it or change what had been done. They're watching, Danny breathed, scanning the tree line. They're still here, still watching. He was right. I could feel eyes on us. Multiple sets. Patient. Waiting. Seeing if we'd learned the lesson, or if we'd need to be taught more permanently. We had 2 options. Stay with our dying friends and likely share their fate, or run while we were still being allowed to run. It took us 4 hours to make that decision. For hours of listening to Tomas whisper for help, listening to Marcus try to scream through damage that shouldn't let him make sound. Watching Paul's eyes follow us with desperate hope that we couldn't fulfill. For hours of the worst moral agony I've ever experienced. Finally, as the sun reached its peak, Danny spoke. We have to go. We have to get help. We can't do anything here. It was a lie. We all knew it. We weren't going for help. We were abandoning them. We were saving ourselves. We were accepting that some things are beyond our power to fix. We ran. Didn't gather supplies. Didn't try to salvage anything. Just ran down the logging road on foot, 90 miles to the nearest town, expecting every moment to hear howling behind us, to feel teeth and claws, to become the next display. They didn't follow. They'd made their point. They'd delivered their message. And they'd let 3 survivors escape to tell the story, to spread the warning, to make sure other loggers understood what waited in those forests. We reached civilization 2 days later, dehydrated, hypothermic, traumatized beyond coherent speech. Search and rescue teams went back to the site immediately. They found the camp destroyed exactly as we described. They found the disabled vehicles. They found the buried equipment. But they didn't find Tomas, Marcus, or Paul. No bodies. No remains. No blood. Nothing. The clearing where they'd been positioned was empty, clean, like nothing had ever been there. The official report concluded we'd experienced some kind of mass psychotic break, possibly drug-induced, possibly from contaminated water. 3 loggers had likely wandered off in confusion and died from exposure somewhere in the vast forest. We 3 survivors had constructed elaborate shared delusions to cope with the trauma of losing our crew members. No mention of attack. No mention of coordination. No mention of impossible creatures that hunted with intelligence and purpose. Just environmental factors and psychological breakdown. The site was closed. The timber contract canceled. The area designated protected habitat, not for any specific species, but just generally protected. The company paid settlements to the families of the missing men, paid us survivors even more to sign NDAs and accept the official story. I signed, took the money, kept quiet for 8 years. But I can't anymore. I can't read news articles about missing hunters and hikers in northern Wisconsin and say nothing. I can't watch wilderness disappearance cases get explained away as exposure or animal attacks and stay silent. I can't let people keep walking into those forests unprepared, unwarned, unaware of what's hunting there. Because here's what I know that the official reports don't say. Tomas, Marcus, and Paul weren't the first. The locals know stories, have always known stories. Loggers who went missing in the 1970s. Hunters who never returned in the 1980s. Camping groups that vanished in the 1990s. The stories are always the same. Competent people, experienced outdoorsmen, entering the forests and never coming out. Or coming out changed, traumatized, refusing to speak about what they saw. And there's a pattern to where it happens. Always in areas scheduled for logging. Always in locations where humans are coming to cut, to take, to harvest. Like something is defending specific territories, specific groves, specific trees that maybe hold significance we don't understand. The thing is, and this is what keeps me awake at night, I think they were trying to communicate, in their own way, with the tools they had. They could have killed all 6 of us that night, could have torn through that radio shed and ended us quickly. But they didn't. They took 3 and left 3. They created a display that survivors could witness and describe. They made certain we understood this was punishment for specific actions, not random predation. They have rules, boundaries, standards we violated. And the punishment was designed to teach us, to change our behavior, to make us stop. I think about that sometimes. About how many of their territories we've logged. How many of their groves we've clear-cut. How much we've taken without asking, without acknowledging, without considering that maybe, just maybe, we're not the only intelligent species with claim to those forests. And I think about Tomas's last words before we abandoned him. He whispered something I didn't include in any official statement, something I've never told anyone because it was too strange, too impossible. He said, they showed me, inside my head, showed me forests before we came, showed me what we destroyed. They want us to know, want us to see what we did, like they could communicate directly, like they could share memories or images or something. Like the display wasn't just about punishment, it was about education, about making us understand our impact in a way words never could. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if Tomas was lucid or if trauma made him imagine things. But I remember his eyes. He looked at me with complete clarity when he said it. With understanding. With a kind of terrible enlightenment. Since that night, I've had dreams. Always the same. I'm walking through forests, and every tree I pass shows me images in the bark. Rings that contain memories, growth layers that hold records of everything that happened in their presence. I see indigenous peoples living in harmony with the forest. I see early settlers arriving. I see logging operations beginning. I see clear cuts spreading like wounds. And in every image, in every tree's memory, I see them watching. The wolf-headed ones. Always present. Always observing. Always remembering. I wake up and my hands hurt. When I look down, there are splinters under my nails like I've been clawing at wood in my sleep. My sheets smell like pine and earth. And sometimes I find things in my apartment that weren't there before. A pine cone on my dresser. An acorn on my nightstand. Tree bark arranged in patterns I don't remember creating. Messages. Reminders. Warnings that I'm still being watched, still being evaluated, still being taught lessons. Or maybe I'm losing my mind. Maybe the trauma broke something in my brain that can't be fixed. Maybe these dreams and objects and sensations are just my psyche fragmenting under the weight of what I witnessed. But then I see the news. Another logger missing in northern Wisconsin. Another hunting party that didn't return from national forest land. Another hiking group that vanished despite experienced leadership and proper equipment. And I know what happened to them. I know what they found. I know what they're experiencing right now if they're still alive. So I'm making this video. Breaking my silence. Violating the NDA. Accepting whatever consequences come. Because people need to know. Need to understand that some forests aren't safe. Some territories are defended. Some beings won't tolerate unlimited taking. Please, like this video. Subscribe to this channel. And most importantly, comment below. Tell me if you've heard similar stories from northern Wisconsin, Michigan's Upper Peninsula, northern Minnesota. Tell me if you know loggers who've experienced something like this and were silenced or dismissed. Tell me if there are patterns I'm missing, connections I'm not seeing. Tell me if you've ever felt hunted in forests where you should have felt safe. Tell me if you've heard howling that sounded too intelligent, too coordinated. Tell me if you've found displays, animal kills arranged in patterns, trees carved with symbols, signs that something is communicating through the landscape itself. And if you work in logging, if you harvest timber, if you enter remote forests with tools and equipment designed to cut and take, please be careful. Pay attention to the signs. Respect the boundaries. And if you find territorial markers, if you hear coordinated howling, if you sense you're being watched by something intelligent and ancient, leave. Immediately. Don't wait. Don't finish the job. Don't try to be brave or tough or prove anything. Just leave. While you still can. While they're still allowing you to leave. Because not everyone gets that option. Tomas, Marcus, and Paul didn't get that option. Whatever happened to them after we ran, whatever they experienced in their final hours or days, they didn't get to choose. They were kept, used, made into messages that no one was allowed to read. I think about them constantly. Wonder if they're still alive somewhere. Wonder if something that can keep humans alive through impossible trauma might be keeping them alive for purposes I can't comprehend. Wonder if they're still in those forests, still positioned, still being used to teach lessons to anyone who dares to enter with cutting tools. Or maybe that's just my guilt talking. Maybe they died minutes after we left. Maybe the howling that followed us down that logging road was them being finally released. Maybe thinking they're still alive is just my brain's way of making the abandonment hurt more, making sure I never forget what I did. I'll never know. The forest keeps its secrets. The official story is sealed. And the only proof I have is trauma, nightmares, and objects that appear in my apartment that I can't explain. But I know what I saw. I know what was done to those men. I know that something intelligent and ancient and utterly merciless hunts in those northern forests. And I know that we, Humans, with our tools and trucks and permits and legal documents, are not the apex predators we believe ourselves to be. We're guests. Tolerated when we're respectful. Punished when we take too much. And sometimes when we cross invisible lines we don't understand, we're made into warnings for others who might make the same mistake. I've stopped working in forestry. Can't. Won't. The smell of cut wood makes me nauseous. The sound of chainsaws triggers panic attacks. I live in a city now, surrounded by concrete and metal and glass, as far from forests as I can get while staying in the same country. But I still hear them. In the distance. On quiet nights. That howling that isn't wolf, isn't coyote, isn't anything natural. Getting closer every year. Following me even here. Reminding me that I was allowed to leave, but not to forget. And sometimes, in the darkest hours before dawn, I wonder if running was the right choice. If maybe staying, accepting whatever punishment they had planned, might have been more merciful than carrying this knowledge, this trauma, this crushing awareness of what we share the world with. But I ran. I saved myself. And now I'm trying to save others by telling this story, by breaking silence, by warning anyone who'll listen that the forests aren't empty. They've never been empty. And what lives in them is watching, waiting, defending territories we keep violating, delivering messages we keep ignoring. How many more displays will they create? How many more loggers need to disappear? How many more bodies need to be arranged before we understand that some places, some groves, some territories are not ours to take? I don't have answers. I just have nightmares, questions, and this desperate need to warn others before they experience what I experienced. So I'm putting this video out there, knowing it'll probably be taken down, knowing the company will sue me, knowing I'm painting a target on myself that might bring them, those wolf-headed hunters, back to finish what they started. But at least I'll have spoken. At least someone will hear. At least the truth will exist somewhere, even if it's denied and dismissed and explained away. Remember this. If you're in northern forests and you hear coordinated howling, if you find animal kills arranged in patterns, if you sense something watching with intelligence that feels wrong, impossible, ancient, don't investigate, don't document, don't try to understand. Run. And pray they let you go like they let me go. Because the alternative, becoming part of their display, their message, their warning to others, is worse than death. It's worse than anything you can imagine. And 3 men I knew, 3 men I abandoned, might still be experiencing it right now. Somewhere in those forests. Still alive. Still teaching lessons. Still screaming in voices no one will hear.